We are live from Studio B at the Beach Street Yacht Club. Apologies for getting on a little late here. We've had a busy morning here at the BSYC. We've got two guests standing patiently by, not one, but two. Alistair Murray in Melbourne and John Emmett in Weymouth, and they'll be with us as our two Olympic experts. Julia is standing by over here next to me. In the studio, we're going to adjust her picture, her camera, her new camera, just a bit. Julia, get you over there. That's better. As we get ready for this cool show, it's an Olympic preview, review, recaps, not really a review unless we're talking about 2028. Our show number 730 for Friday, the 9th of August, 2024. Thanks for joining us from all over the world, including Blake Middleton, who's up again at his home in the land of 10,000 lakes in Minnesota. Clayton Embley's on down in his old Kentucky home. Thanks, Clayton, for becoming, again, renewing, re-upping your patronage of this show. Henry Reese has been a huge help. Bonsoir from the Olympic Games in Marseille. Bob Walker in North Texas. Alan Long, everything's okay. Greetings from tornado-ravaged northeastern Ohio. You've had a tough week there. You and Julie Aarons right below you saying hi from Cleveland. No power until next week. I hope you got power there, Alan. Peter Taylor, New York City. J. Frederick Bland, just in time. The non-sailing CEO must go. Graham Sweeney checking in from Yell, Shetland in Scotland. I'm your host, Tom Eamon. Thank you for joining us for this show on Friday, the 9th of August, 2024, show number 730. And Julia, I ask you to start. What are we celebrating today?
Oh.
There's your clue. You want more of a clue than that?
Red tile roofs?
Well, that was the Dutch flag there.
Oh.
I'll bet you John and Alistair know that building. Let me turn their mics on. Let's welcome Alistair Murray and John Emmett, our esteemed Olympic experts. See if anybody knows. But before you guys weigh in, let's see if anybody else knows where that shot, from whence that shot is taken, and what that brick building is there in the background. Dutch Olympic success. Thierry de Jong says, yes, that's what we're celebrating. That is the Dutch flag. But Thierry, what is that building? Does anybody know? I'll give you another hint. That's in Medemblik. Thierry knows it. No, not in Den Haag, not in the Hague, Gordon. It's in Medemblik, up on the IJsselmeer in the northern part of the Netherlands. That is, we're celebrating Dutch sailing, as we all figured out. That's the Royal Hollandia Yacht Club, the KZRV Hollandia in Medemblik. And it is one of the coolest yacht clubs in the world. It really is the, forgive me for saying this, the New York Yacht Club of the Netherlands, shall we call it, the Royal Yacht Squadron of the Netherlands. Is a very famously cool place. And John Emmett, what's that bar that we are overlooking there in that photo?
I don't know what the bar is you're overlooking.
Well, that is the bar right next door to the Royal Hollandia. I was swimming there and became Dutch champions.
Really?
Bring back the Firefly and mixed team racing to the Olympics. Just a thought. Well, I'll give you some more. There is another clue. That's there. You can see the building on the left that we were just looking at from across that bar, the outdoor bar top there. And that is called, I'll tell you what, it's the spiritual heart of Dutch sailing. And I've been there many times over the years. Tjeerd's got it, the Café Brackenboer. Café Brackenboer, Jack Brackenboer is the proprietor. It is where all the sailing goes on, even if you're out in the new Olympic Harbor, which is, well, new, it's been there, I don't know, 15 years. That is in Medemblik, the spiritual heart of Dutch sailing, the Royal Yacht Club Hollandia there on the left, at least their station in Medemblik, and Café Brackenboer, where everything happens, even the skipper's meetings, the beer after the racing. Mm-hmm. It all happens right outdoors, especially if the weather is nice in Medemblik in this time of year. There is the Regatta Center, Medemblik. That's new. You can see the town there in the upper right. Yeah, it's beautiful, isn't it, Julia? Mm. And the town that we were just showing a couple of the shots. And that's where the racing really used to all take place, including the boats being hauled out on the hard stand in and around the club and the bars there on the foreshore. But what, John, 15 years ago, they built the Regatta Center, Medemblik?
Crikey, I would have thought even more than that, to be honest.
Could be closer to 20, I suppose. Somebody will know. Maybe Tjeerd de Jong knows. I bet Rob Weiland worked in that bar. Andrew McIrvin is on. Well, it's a fabulous spot. And as I said, it's in the Netherlands, obviously. It's up about an hour, not quite an hour north of Amsterdam. You go up the highway, up to the dike up there at the top of the IJsselmeer. And you go across the dike and over to Groningen and then keep going further east to Hamburg, where we lived for 4 years. And I used to go back and forth to regattas there in the Netherlands up at Medemblik. And that's a closer look at it where the Regatta Center is, just up from Enkhuizen. You see that little town called Hoorn, Julia, at the end of the A7? I was almost killed in the Hoorn train station.
No kidding.
No kidding. I was walking across from the train station, across the tracks, and one of these trains came buzzing by, and all of a sudden the gate went down, and it hit me, not on the head, but on the shoulder. Broken clavicle. But if it had hit me on the head, I probably would not be here today.
Well,
I have fond memories here, however.
I know.
This is a video from a few years ago. The Delta Lloyd used to be what the regatta was. I think it's just now that...
Delta Lloyd Regatta zegt Medemblik. En wat hoort er nog meer bij Medemblik?
It used to be the spa, right? There it is, Café Brackenboer. There's the famous Jack Brackenboer. I don't even know if he's still alive.
Nou, dit is een zeilcafé eigenlijk geworden omdat in 63 de oude visserslag hier voor de deur. Die werd door de Hollandia gekocht, de zeilvereniging. En die ging allemaal wedstrijden organiseren. En toen werden mijn ouders gevraagd van willen jullie open zijn voor ons als we wedstrijden hebben. Dus een soort kantineachtig verhaal. En eigenlijk zijn we dus met Hollandia meegegroeid als kantine van het zeilgebeuren in Medemblik. En zo zijn we eigenlijk dus beroemd geworden.
Okay, well, enough of this video, which goes on for a while, but the point is that it is really a cool place. The Delta Lloyd Regatta, which used to be the Spa Regatta, which I can't remember what all it's been called. But that cafe is a jazz club at night, and I played, believe it or not, Alistair, banjo in there. And even the upright, you see behind Alistair, he's got the upright bass there. And I asked him, and just as we were getting on the air, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about the upright bass as we segue away from Café Brackenboer.
Okay, good morning or good evening, whatever it is, wherever you are. Tom, Julia, and all the Fozy. It's great to be with you. Just quickly on Holland. Yes, I was in Medemblik just a month ago, and I went there to buy a boat, actually. I bought a Sophia 24 Light from Sophia Yachts, so you can all Google that and have a look at it. It's a cute little boat, and it's just a fabulous, fabulous place. Behind me, yes, it's a paper mache a statue. I had a very dear aunt who was my favourite relative outside my very immediate family, who died young at the age of 60, and I got a small inheritance. And I was down in Hobart, and this fine statue was standing at the front of the yacht club, or next to the casino in Hobart, because I got a small inheritance from my aunt, and I loved her so much. I thought, I'm going to buy this guy from her as a gift to me. So I bought him, transported him over from Hobart. It's been a big part of my life since, and his name is Jan, in honour of my Aunt Jan. I love him very much.
Yeah.
And he's a great talking point to everybody who visits.
Jan.
Jan.
Yeah.
My
Jan.
My late great mother's name was Jan.
Yes.
How about you, John? How about there's a John? Tell us, John, about your experience over there in Medemblik.
I used to really like Medemblik. I went there both campaigning what was then the Laser and the 49er and the Tornado, and I remember like the social side was really good. I used to go to the black and white bar and have a litre of beer after racing, and after about 10 years they told me that in fact the glasses above the bar were just there for display, but they didn't seem to mind too much. But unfortunately, the Medemblik Regatta Centre hasn't been used for the World Cups for the last few years. It's been down in Almere, close to Amsterdam, and I just don't think it's as good a venue as Medemblik. We had a lot of weed problems. The race course is much further away. I mean, it's a lovely city. Almere is up and coming. I guess it's the second city in Holland. But I really like Medemblik. I originally used to just sleep in my van there. After a while, I progressed to a tent, and I did lose my jacket once in one of the bars. Well, I didn't lose it. I went to the toilet, I came back, and it had gone, and I had my car keys, so I progressed to walking around the boat park, trying to find anyone who had a tent to sleep in. And then a few years later, there's a caravan park just the other side of the road, and it was really great that you could stay that close to the regatta. And it's such a shame for me that they don't have it in Medemblik. I mean, as a class, Ilka has had quite a number of world championships, etc. there. And I think choosing a good sailing venue rather than the city is probably the priority in my book.
Mm-hmm.
Mark Reed is saying he loves the Netherlands. He spent some of the summer of 1983 there in Amsterdam. I love the Netherlands too. I've had a lot of good fun there, guys. And I just want to thank both of you at the outset here again for coming on. We were a few minutes late getting ourselves organized at this end. Not your fault. You were both. In fact, what time is it there in Melbourne? It must be 06:20, right? 06:21. Yeah. How did you get back so quickly from Marseille?
So I caught a train from Marseille to Paris, and I'd like to tell you the story about that train ride separately, because John Emmett was a very big part of that for reasons I'll explain when we're talking about the Olympics. And then I flew from Paris to Singapore, from Singapore to Melbourne. I think I've had 4 hours sleep in the last 48 hours. and not only, I'll mention just the hour of the day. One thing you'll notice as the show goes on is that it's pitch black behind me. And as the show goes on, you'll see a Melbourne sunrise. So I hope you enjoy it.
Saturday morning there. Okay, so you want to save that story? John is drinking something green, and this wall behind is green, and there's comments about it. Alistair, in case you're feeling a bit thirsty at 06:21, don't worry, it's not a habit. It's jet lag. Pindar. Does John go by Jan, light at night in that YC's bar? I don't know about all that. Okay, Commodore, Mr. President, Super Coach, I have another thing we're celebrating today because as somebody who, I hold the New York Yacht Club in great esteem, having joined that club in 1981 during the America's Cup, my first America's Cup, which was 1980. And this week, they are wrapping up. It started earlier this week, I guess on Monday. That was the captain's meeting earlier this week at the Stonington Harbor Yacht Club. Their annual, and we were talking about this, Julie, on the show the other day, their 168th annual yacht club cruise. It started back in the 1840s. And It's a fabulous event. I commend it to anyone who ever has the opportunity to go on it. Alistair, have you been on it?
No, I haven't. Haven't had the pleasure.
We got to get, and John, same for you, but it's a magnificent event. And these obviously are the flag officers, and they are our Fosey, Super Fosey there in the middle, of course. But on the left is current Commodore Jay Cross, with whom, and very distinguished looking he is, but against whom I used to race 470s back in the early 70s, actually, before the 470 was even chosen as the Olympic class. We were back and forth racing Fireballs and 470s. But the New York Yacht Club Cruise is going on this week. Sometimes they run it in Maine. Sometimes they run it in and around Newport and the islands out to the east, the Elizabeth Islands. Sometimes they run it in Long Island Sound, which is what they've been doing this week. Today they're racing from the eastern end of Long Island Sound out to Newport. And then tomorrow they wrap up with the Astor Cup. I think it is. Yeah, the Astor Cup. Bravo Zulu to them, 168 years. I think they missed once or twice in war years, World War I and World War II, but don't hold me to that. I could be wrong. Bravo Zulu to New York Yacht Club on their 168th cruise. And of course, our Fosey, Claire Harrington, there in the middle, who is the Vice Commodore. And if she plays her cards right, as we've said on this show any number of times, she will be Commodore in another year's time. So Bravo Zulu to her as well. Yeah, Peter Taylor saying Stonington is a fabulous stop. Well, they pick and choose, obviously, various clubs and various stops and harbors when they do the New York cruise. It's only a week long, and it's a terrific event. It's also terrific to have all the Fosey on here, including John and Alistair and Julia, who's not only Fosey, she's a star of the show, the star of the show, I think. But Julia, we thank very much all the Fosey, whether they come on here regularly to watch or they are former or current guests on the show. And those of you who support us via Patreon, become a patron, patreon.com/join/Sailing Illustrated, as Clayton Embley has just done again. That gets us through.
Excuse me, Tom.
Go ahead, Alistair.
Can I jump in, mate?
Please.
So I noticed somebody else is watching. He's just come up on my feed, and I'll mention him to you so you can send him a shout out. Mark Nicholas is tuned in, and he's the father of Connor Nicholas. You mentioned the 470.
Yes.
Well, our 470 representatives just sailed in the medal race. We're very proud of them. They finished in the top 10. And I spent most of last week with Mark Nicholas and his wife Carol at our bar in Marseille, and I noticed he's tuned in. So well done to the whole Nicholas and Jerwood families of our 470 team. Thank you. Nicely
done, Alistair. And we should also say well done to everybody connected with Australian sailing. You've had a great run in this Olympics, and I know because I've been seeing some of the comments that it's probably at least in part, if not large part, due to your leadership and the leadership of some very other cool sailors in your beloved country, in our beloved sport. Andrew McIrvin, who's coming to the St. Francis Yacht Club Stag Cruise next month. Should I bring my hat? I think he should bring his hat and his tie. Bring it all, Andrew.
Yeah.
And a blazer. You don't have to wear it at the Stag Cruise. I'm teasing you. But
No.
Jay Hanfield saying that he just left Fisher's Island this morning. Fisher's, okay.
Good heavens.
Every once in a while, a world war might interrupt the regatta, David James is saying. But we have an Olympic wrap-up today, with Alistair and John. They're live from their respective hometowns of Melbourne and Weymouth. And I thought we'd open with this slide, Alistair, of you and some dignitaries in Marseille just before you left.
Yes, these three guys have been name dropping ever since I was there, saying that they spent time with me. I've noticed that. Left to right, Russell Coots. That was great to talk to him about Sail GP and some of the innovations that they're working on, and how ambitious they are for the future in terms of further improving that great event. Next to him is Keith Musto. He's a really old mate of mine. I hadn't seen him in so long. When we were both in the sailing industry together, and he was selling his Musto clothing, and I was peddling my Ronstand stuff around the world, we used to see each other at all the shows. And in fact, probably 30 or 40 years ago, I reminded him that I had dinner at his house and stayed the night. And and it was great to catch up with him. He's such a fantastic. He's a legend of sailing, a silver medalist in his own right. Then there's me, and then on my left or the right of the photo is His Royal Highness Prince Albert of Monaco, and it was just fantastic to be able to chat to those four esteemed and distinguished gentlemen out on the water watching the racing at Marseille. An absolute highlight of my life, really.
Well, come on, give us some hot tips. What did Russell have to say? He's got his new factory open now in England. He's been touting that on Facebook with some photos. What did His Serene Highness have to say?
Well, His Serene Highness talked a lot about his love of sailing, and I was able, and we talked about the history of sailing, and we were able to share some pretty good stories. I told him, for example, about the fact of going into the medal race. Our sailor Werney was 14 points clear of Pavlos Contides going into the medal race, and exactly 12 years ago in London, our sailor Tom Slingsby, who sails in SailGP, as you know, was also 14 points ahead going into the medal race of the same person, Pavlos Contides. So how's that for a bit of symmetry?
That's...
And it reminded me of another story. I was talking to His Highness about dragons, and he has a very great love of dragons. And I told him a story about the Dragon Worlds in Melbourne. I think it was in 2016, and there was a Swedish gentleman sailing in those Dragon Worlds. And believe it or not, he was sailing the same boat that his father had sailed in the Melbourne Olympics in 1956. So it was the same boat being sailed by a person with the same name exactly 50 years later. And anyway, we shared a lot of great stories like that.
Now tell us back to the bass player behind you, and then I'm going to ask you to center yourself up so that we get you on the screen here in the center. But what's that around his neck? Is that one of Julia's scarves, or a fancy tie, or what is that?
Oh, well, that's got a lot of sentimental value to me. So Jan has been standing in my house for probably 2 decades now, and he's never worn anything until recently. I had a very, very dear friend and mentor of mine by the name of Andrew, who was one of my bosses at Ronstand in the very early days. He and I were the best of friends, absolute best of friends, so close to me. And he was known for his love of colourful ties. That was his kind of signature. And very sadly, he died early this year, way too young. And I took care of the wake arrangements and the funeral and all that kind of thing for the family. And I asked for one gift from the family, and that was one of his ties. So that's the tie from my dear friend Andrew, and that will live around Jan's neck for as long as I'm around.
Nice.
How nice.
Okay, shall we get to a Bravo Zulu here, because we are talking about the Olympics, and it's an amazing regatta, always is, even the problems with light air and the venue and so on. But Bravo Zulu, we've saluted all the medalists as we've gone through. I think on Tuesday we covered most of them that haven't. We got the women's kites now and the men's kite. But this gentleman, this morning our time, won the men's kite gold. Valentin Bontis from Austria. And I don't know if either of you was watching the TV. I got up early to watch it myself, but he's a big fella, and not to be confused with Ian Murray, Alistair, but he is a big fella. And we're going to talk about the weights in the kiting, because it's turned into a bit of a controversy. There are the medalists.
Oh, yes.
The final medalists today in the kite male. And that's Tony Vodacek from Slovakia on the left, who won the silver. You can see he's a big boy as well. Valentin Bontis, of course, in the middle, the gold medal winner.
Slovenia, Tom.
Sorry, Slovenia. Thank you, John. Slovenia. And then on the right, Max Mader from Singapore and he's only 17, the bronze winner, and he's also, at least in the hips and the waist and maybe the lower torso, he's a big boy as well. But Bravo Zulu to them all. And it was, they had a bit of breeze. And it was, Andrew Pindar says he's now 18. Well, he must have just turned 18. Thank you. for that. Glad we have smart Fosey on here, Julia.
And well up to date.
But here is a photo of him. Well, he's obviously, this is on the medal stand on the podium today. Here he is racing.
Ah.
And you can see in this photo in particular, that is not, there's no AI involved in this. That is a real photo of him racing, apparently today. I don't know if it was today or yesterday, but in the last couple of days, it was sent to me by one of the Fosey, and called him sumo, and called that sport sumo sailing. Valentine is fully 120 kg. That's 265 pounds. And we're going to talk about this more when we get to the ladies in the kiting, but he is obviously a big boy. So I'll come to you in a moment, guys, but while we're at it, let's talk a little bit about Max Mader, who through Andrew says is 18. This was a nice article in the South China Morning Post a few weeks ago. Paris Olympics meet Max Mader, the kite surfer, on the verge of Singapore's second gold ever, or so they hoped. And it's generated a lot of interest in Singapore. They had the Singapore Sailing Federation had a big facility in Singapore, and hundreds of people gathered in the last few days to watch Max Mader in his quest for Olympic kite foiling gold. And you can see the number of people there to the max. It's from a website called Mothership in Singapore. And this is on the beach today as he came back to the beach after, disappointingly for some, winning the bronze, but nonetheless medaling at age 17, or I guess it's 18.
Pindar says 18 in September.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Andrew. Andrew, he is 17. So I give Julia my fact checker. Huh?
Yeah.
I give my fact checker credit. My fact checker was laying in bed, in my bed this morning at about 5:30 when I was checking those facts. But bravo Zulu to Singapore, to this youngster. They had a big crowd today as he was coming back in, and that photo courtesy of another Fosey who's on here, Henry Rees, who I first met at the Norddeutsche Regattaverein NRV in Hamburg many years ago when we were living there in the late 90s. And he is working now in Paris. He's in France, and he was a key member of the organizing committee, the venue team there in Marseille. And we appreciate Henry helping feed me some info as well as a few of the other Fosey. As Bill Wingrove is saying, yeah, that guy looks like he's offensive or defensive lineman size. The kite guys are bigger than the fin sailors, J. Frederick Bland is saying. Don't get between them and dinner. John Emmett's been telling us that they're getting bigger and bigger on the kites, and in fact, they have been. This is back to Max, age 17, soon to turn 18. The youngest medalist since an old friend of mine, Mike Shuttle, won a gold crewing on the 5.5 in 1952. Jody's saying, he looks like a normal-sized human to me.
Yeah.
Mike Shuttle ran the Olympic classes regattas in Southern California leading up to the 84 games, and he's a peach of a guy, retired, Julia, like you, for a retired headhunter.
Oh, good.
And just a terrific guy. Here's a picture of him. And he was, I found an article this morning from the Laurentian. He went to Lawrence School. And this is a recent article just in the last week or so. I was 15 and I sailed almost every day for nearly 2 months. In fact, he says in this same article, I didn't drag the quote out, but he said they didn't have an Olympic trials. They took applications. This is 52, the year before I was born, so 71 years ago. They took applications, and apparently their crew applied and were accepted. So they practiced for a few months. We sailed our boat, then they shipped it. Then they sailed the boat from Stockholm to Helsinki for the 52 Olympics in Finland. The Olympics required someone to become the alternate, so that was me. There were 7 races. Remember that when there were alternates, John? we had alternates back in the day. The Olympics required someone to become the alternate, so that was me. There were 7 races, and I raced in one race, the next to last race, and we won. We also won the last race, so we got a gold medal. Yeah, he's from up in your neck of the woods, Blake Middleton. Mike's brother, I think, Andy Shuttle, raced at Minnetonka Yacht Club for a number of years back in the 70s. I think the whole family's from Philadelphia originally. Fine guy, Mike Shuttle is. He adds that while the records indicate that he earned a gold medal, he never actually received one.
Yeah.
In later Olympics, they gave medals to the alternates who competed, but back then they didn't. But I nevertheless crewed on the gold medal winning 5.5 meter. It was a really great experience for a young man. Moreover, if there was one hitch in his Olympic encounter, the Laurentian is saying, Shuttle says it's that he missed the Olympic parade. Quote, my father didn't want to spend the money to buy me the uniform, so I didn't march in it. Recalls Shuttle, who was an alternate on the 72 team as well, with his brother Ferdinand Blake Middleton. Mike Shuttle, a good guy, good friend of mine from way back in leading up to the 84 Olympics. Haven't seen him in a while. I think he's a past Commodore at the Alameda Bay Yacht Club in Long Beach. Terrific gentleman that he is. So,
Sounds terrific.
Jody Shields, I wonder if he will be the only person in history to win a gold medal in kiting. That is back to the kites now.
Yeah.
I don't think this discipline will be in the next Olympics. We're going to talk about that, Jody, with our esteemed guests. I think the Canadian ladies are wearing a Canuck innie. What is that? Gordon Smith, send us
That's a joke.
Is that a joke? A Canuck innie? I don't know. Okay, well, we've got a picture of an esteemed Australian sportsman at the end of the show, so stay tuned to the Whiskey Tango Foxtrot. Alistair, you're gonna love that picture, and Julia is too. I'm sure we'll get a finger wag. It reminds me of the Dumbo song, When I See an Elephant Fly. Okay, let's talk about the medal count because we are celebrating the Dutch today.
Let's talk about the Olympic classes, Tom, because I think we brushed over it.
No, we're coming
very
back to
quickly.
it. I'm sorry we didn't have time to run through this. We'll come back to it and talk about the Olympic classes in the future.
But the weight issue, it's something which we've talked about really a lot. So for the NACRA, it's increased a little bit.
Yeah, John, let me drag you back to it, okay? I got some slides I want you to talk to. We're going to get to the weight issue because you're absolutely right. So
I'll just jump in and say I see Blake Middleton asked what's in those boxes at the hand of the medalists. What it is, it's an Olympic, it's a certificate.
Okay.
A lot of people ask that question.
Thank you for that. Okay, Julia, anything else, guys, before I move to the medal count, and then we'll get back to your weight issue, John? These are very assertive guests, Julia.
That's because they know a lot.
They know a lot. Exactly. That's why we have them on the show. Okay, so here's the medal list. I did it myself this morning because I couldn't find a good graphic yet from World Sailing, and maybe it's out by now. The Netherlands on top, these are the 30 medals in 10 classes. The Netherlands on top with 2 gold and 2 bronze, followed by Austria with 2 gold, Italy also with 2 gold. Australia, led by Mr. President Alistair Murray, with a gold and a silver. Israel, a country of what? 4, 5, 6 million people? I don't know. Gold and silver. Great Britain with a gold and bronze down from their previous higher medal counts. Spain with a gold. France, New Zealand, and Sweden with a silver and a bronze, and then some silvers, and then some bronzes only, down to the USA alphabetically at the bottom of that pile. 10 classes, 30 medals. The big winners in this Olympiad: Netherlands, Austria, Italy, Australia, Israel, and Great Britain. Gentlemen, take it away. Comments?
Who do you want to go first?
Up to you.
Well, I've done a bit of analysis on this, and maybe I can contribute some commentary. I'm obviously really pleased with the Australian performance. In fact, the Australian Olympic performance in total has just blown us away. We're a country of 27 million people, and we're 3rd overall in the overall medal count, which just really thrills us no end. Personally, I was pleased with with a couple of medals for Australia. We didn't quite meet our expectations across the board in terms of medal races and success across the squad. I think we've got some we've got some work to do, but very pleased to finish equal 4th on the medal count. But also looked at other measures of success. Our chef de mission is a woman called Anna Mears, and she made a fabulous speech at a reception we had, and she talked about how brilliant it is to just make the Olympics. Since you talked about the courage it takes to represent your country with the eyes of the country and the world on you. It just, for young people, that must be incredibly daunting and challenging as an experience. That takes a lot of courage, and it's a hell of an achievement, just to make it. So I looked across all of the medals and all of the medal races. The top 10 in each class. And I've done a bit of homework on this, and I won't take too much time, but there was 35 countries in the top 10, which is absolutely a fantastic spread. There was 19 countries that medalled, which is also, I think a fantastic spread. The top 10 ranked, we all know was Netherlands, Austria, Italy, Australia, Israel, GBR, France, New Zealand, Spain, and then the others. But if you look at those that have made the medal rate, made the top 10 in each class, I think that says a lot about the depth of each of the countries going forward. And this is really important to us, that we're preparing for Los Angeles and Brisbane after that. Our team was the youngest we've ever had, and we've been investing in the future. We've got some young people coming through, so we really do look at the top 10. And it's fascinating to look at a couple of comparisons, and I'll give you a couple of extremes. On the one hand, you've got Austria. They won 2 medals. They were both gold. Man, if you're going to do it, you might as well win gold ones. Mm-hmm. But there's some other countries that stand out for having quite a lot of success, but not actually having medalled. And if you look at Brazil, 4 in the top 10, Germany, 5 in the top 10, Poland, 4 in the top 10, and Switzerland, 5 in the top 10, and not one of them won a medal. But that doesn't mean that they didn't represent their country magnificently. And if you look at another analysis I've done to rank it by more depth, I actually went through the field and I gave 5 points for gold, 4 for silver, 3 for bronze, and then 1 point for making the top 10. And it actually just changes the look of it a little, and it's really kind of interesting. And what shows up is that people like Italy, Great Britain, France, New Zealand, and even the USA move up the table a little bit. If you look at it like that, they've achieved quite a lot in terms of depth. And in fact, the USA, in terms of depth, I'd rate them a 9th. It wasn't so bad. So anyway, happy to hear John's perspective on medals and medal counts and things. But we're very pleased to finish equal 4th. We're really concentrating on the depth and our squads and our development and our coaching. And, our goal was to have the 8 classes that were represented all finish in the top 10. And I'm a little disappointed 5 of them did out of the 8. But that gives us work to do. Mm-hmm. Overall, we're pretty happy.
Bravo Zulu.
Yeah, that's great.
John, you're a witness.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Alistair. I think the BST possibly suffered a little bit with some of the people retiring. I mean, we've got 2 Olympic gold medalists who retired at the end of the last cycle. And it takes a long time to build up. I mean, I remember Pavos, when he was a youth sailor, and he's now come back and got another medal. And I think one of the things which makes a big difference is just the cost of campaigning. So it is harder for those smaller M&As to have a field of 10 boats. So they have to put their money where it's most effective, because you need to train in exactly the same equipment that you race in. So I think one of the things that Werney did, and I'm sure Alistair is aware, but he was actually racing in a Bovington boat, which is what he ended up racing with the Olympics, So to have a more extreme example, you couldn't train in an aero, then race in an Ilka, or train in an Ilka, then race in an aero. And I would estimate, to be successful, you need to do 200 days on the water at least every year. So imagine that's in an Ilka. You need to own several Ilkas or charter Ilkas for 200 days. And that's the cheapest boat as opposed to board. And then we've all looked and seen what the successful countries, or most successful countries, are doing, is they're running a squad system. And that's why you need to have, at least 4 fast people in an Ilka squad or whatever the squad is. And that's why it's hard for those countries to compete against the Big Ten. And, I think maybe I was misrepresented on the last show. I mean, I love keelboat racing. I'm sure that's the future for me as I get older and hiking gets harder and harder. But just the cost for a small M&A to have 1 keelboat for 200 days and the right keelboat, it just makes it so difficult. And I think strength and depth is the key thing to winning medals, because the broader your base, the more likely somebody is to pop out the top, and that's where the small countries do well. But I wouldn't look too much at the results. I would look more at the performances, if that makes sense.
Okay, that was my phone ringing because my daughter is calling and she has do not disturb breakthrough. So Meg, I'll call you after the show. We're live. Ciao for now.
Ciao for now.
Okay, there's Meg. And you know, you have your daughter, you have Julia, you have a few people on breakthrough, on do not disturb breakthrough for emergencies.
Absolutely.
John, tell us, remind us what the squad system is, just in a nutshell, and give us the thumbnail of that, and why, and what countries are doing it, as opposed,
So
and
if you look at
what are
Australia,
not.
I can say this, and then Alistair can correct me when I'm wrong, but they've basically wrapped up the laser now ILCA class for the last 4 cycles. So everybody looks at the fact that you've got Tommy Slingsby or TB or whatever, but behind them, there was always a big push from other athletes. I mean, arguably TB could have won a gold in the next cycle ever. I mean, the fact is, when you have a squad, you have sailors that are so strong that you're not sending a current Olympic champion to go to event, and it just means they all push each other. Now, for those sailors, it's really hard. You look at the British sailing team, Elliot Hansen would undoubtedly have gone to Olympic Games for nearly any other country other than Great Britain after winning Year's regatta, which was part of the selection trials. So for the sailors, it's a double-edged sword that it's really, really hard to qualify to go to games, but they all push each other. And that's something that makes it much harder for the smaller M&As, and they have to work together. And as a coach, if you've got a program for a country, then you can focus on what's best for your country. Now, of course, the resources will be slightly more tailored towards the selected athlete. And I think it's good, if at all possible, to select, say, 12 months before. And I've made it very clear what I think is important for selection. It's international events. So World Championships, the World Sailing World Championships, and maybe regattas that are actually at that venue. But that's why, if you just put all your eggs in one basket, it's much harder. It's much harder to perform. So if you look at the small countries, I can tell you who their training partners are, and you'll see their training partners are right at the front of the fleet as well.
What countries do not use the squad system as you define?
The unsuccessful ones.
Across the board.
Yes.
Yeah.
Alistair?
Well, just a comment, not to directly answer that question, but yes, if you look at this ILCA squad, you know, we've won the last 4 gold medals with Tom Slingsby, Tom Burton, and then Matt Wern the last 2 times. And the bad news for all of you is that we have more young, great ILCA sailors lined up behind him, with people like Luke Elliott and Finn Alexander and others. We've got a lot of talent. It's because they all work together so closely as a squad, with high quality coaching and a lot of resource put into it, and we maintain that whole squad feeling, that vibe that really leads all of the ILCA sailors wanting to help each other along. And we have young laser sailors or ILCA sailors that accept it's not their time yet, but if they keep putting in, they're going to rise up in the squad, and they'll have the rest of the squad supporting them. In contrast to that, John mentioned that Australia struggled from having a couple of high-profile retirements. Well, exactly. A really great example there would be the 470. You know, we absolutely dominated 470 sailing for so long, but we got to the stage where Matt Belcher had dominated to such a degree and had taken, you know, we'd used a lot of resource pushing him and his crews along, and the rest. I think the rest of 470 sailing in Australia, you know, struggled as a result of it. He I'm sure he would have been, you know, certainly as a medal if he'd been sailing. He walked away from it, retired. That left us with a big hole. Well, you know, you're not going to step straight in and win Olympic medals, you know, from such a short start. And we're really pleased to have the quality of people like Nia Jerwood and Connor Nicholas participate in the games for the first time, achieve a top 10 result, and hopefully with an eye to the future, doing better as part of a bigger squad of more people participating and helping each other along.
Well, you do something else, Alistair, that I like a lot, and it probably doesn't directly contribute to your success, but it's got to help. you embed Bo Outeridge, for example, and I'm sure you do others, but you've got Nathan's brother, Bo, embedded with the team, taking photos, taking videos, writing stuff for social media. It's got to lift the spirits of everybody. And what did you, during the games itself, do you as a, and you know, sometimes I ask questions I know the answers to, do you as a country and all the Australian, you know, the senior serious people, you had Nick, whose last name escapes me. No, it's Nick's last name.
Douglas.
Nick Douglas was there at the venue doing the commentary for the terrific shoreside commentary, at least the English part of that commentary. And who else? You've got John Bertrand, who is famously good in our sport and others, and is a leader. And does he still? He ran swimming for a while in Australia, right?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, so we, I guess we have the squad mentality around the people that support the teams as well. And we had an amazing, we call it our friends and family facility across the road from the sailing facility. I was there every single day, all day, every day, sitting alongside Bo Outeridge, who's a fantastic young man. He worked his heart off on the communications. We had Lisa Darmanin over on the over within the compound, closer to the action, feeding information back to him. Nick Douglas was superb. She was hired to do the commentary during the game, so her live commentary was taking place. And we had this little community, WhatsApp group of everybody that matters to us a great deal. I copied you in on Tom, as you know, and John Bertrand. John Bertrand was part of that, and all of the people that really care about sailing were just commenting and throwing suggestions around and encouraging each other and sharing congratulations. And we had this. It was just a really great community to be a part of. And at the Friends and Family venue, which I was at every day, we had the families of all of the sailors there all of the time, coming in and having lunch and having drinks with us and whatever. And the end of each day, the athletes themselves would come back across the road from the compound, walk into the Friends and Family venue, big rounds of applause. Gray and Matt brought their medals over and shared them around with photographs and toasts of champagne and parties and 3 cheers going in every direction. It was just a wonderful scene to be part of.
Any other countries have such a Friends and Family facility right on the venue or next door?
Well, I don't know who else did it to the degree we did. There was a smaller version of what we did about 6 doors up, and that was the Danes. And, they had a really great little community going there. And I actually had Peter Harkin come and visit me at the Friends and Family.
That would have been fun.
He and I had dinner together one night, and on the way out, we walked into the Danish compound and introduced ourselves and got some free beers from them, which was a lot of fun. But the Danes had a good party going as well.
John, do the Brits do anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big community thing. I remember, like at Princess Sophia Regatta, the RYA, I think, have 37 support staff, so it's quite hard to imagine how many that is. But even the really successful countries, they tend to work together. So I think probably the standout performance for me was from the NACRA 17, and they have 4 fast Italian boats, and they train with the British as well. So arguably, because I got my call wrong in terms of the medal prediction, but arguably all the best sailors in the world were in one little training group. And that just makes it very hard for anyone else to break in, because success breeds success. And that's such an important thing. And especially in those slightly more technical classes, I think that's made a big, big difference.
Couple of good points here. Go ahead, please.
Can I just add to Tom that it's this community, we recognise that we've got limited resources, and the people that have got, a bit of the personal ability to be able to afford to be there, people like myself and fellow Australian Sailing Director Rich Wormald and ex-Australian Sailing President David Goetz, and all of these supporters that turn up and are part of Friends and Family. We do this on our own dime. We pay for our own travel, we pay for our own drinks, we pay for our own meals. We don't tap into the Australian sailing machine to one degree at all. We're there because we love it. We're there because we want to be there. We're doing it there. We're doing it for the young people. We're doing it for the success of our country.
Bravo, Zulu. Yeah, your former president. Who was your president just before you?
Well, my immediate predecessor was Dan Belcher, who's Matt Belcher's brother,
Right.
and the one before that
Wasn't Matt Allen there as well?
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth. So the one prior to him was Matt Allen. So I served on the board under Matt Allen and under Dan Belcher before I took over. Matt Allen is a sensational contributor to sailing. He was at Friends and Family Australia for a lot of the time. We had some meals together. We shared stories. We had meetings with World Sailing. We did a lot of the work behind the scenes. But Matt is a vice president of the Australian Olympic Committee, very involved in world sailing matters, and he's a fantastic contributor to sailing.
Yeah, and a great offshore sailor, having won Sydney Hobart, once, twice?
Yes, and the latest news is he's now chartered Comanche.
So
you'll see. Oh, is he?
Yeah, one hears.
You'll see Matt Allen back in action in the Hobart race this year.
Comanche coming back from Europe to Australia. Hey guys, it's fabulous to have you on here. I'm going to ask you the obvious question in a minute. Did the U.S. have a friends and family facility there? How's that for alliteration, Julia? Gordon Smith saying the Danish team were playing beer pong in their team tent. Well, as you would. Why not? Especially when it's so bloody hot. Yeah. And back and forth supporting what John has said about a squad environment. Bill Canfield down, the past president of the U.S. Virgin Islands Sailing Association, Visa. And he is, of course, the father of Taylor Canfield. He's saying the U.S.'s only medal came from the squad environment, meaning our bronze in the 49er. So Jody Shields is agreeing, and squad in front of the line privileges at the Australian Ilka factory, maybe. Okay, I don't know about all that. But did the U.S., guys, have such a facility?
To be honest, I don't know. Okay. I'm sure they had something, but I think you need to ask somebody within the camp.
Jay Rendell, who is supporting was supporting our FX team, Jay up in Minnesota, is saying the U.S. had a USA house for that purpose. Oh. Okay. As we watch the sun come up behind Alistair.
Yeah. You'll see the colors changing. It'll be nice and bright soon. It's a developing thing for the show.
Okay, well, speaking of the U.S., let's look at the U.S. medal take. And I take your point about the development, about the pipeline and having a number of people in the top 10, okay. But it's the end of the day, you still need to perform, especially if you're going to get money from your National Olympic Committee and so on, and sponsors. This was the U.S. I've just gone back to the turn of the century, to 2000. U.S. in 2000 had 4 medals: gold, silver, and bronze. We were actually a little thin in 96, but that wasn't why I didn't put it on here. I'm just trying to show you the history over the last almost 5 years. In 2004, we had 2 medals, gold and silver. Likewise, in 2008, gold and silver. None, famously, in 2012 in your hometown, John, of Weymouth. 2016, the 1 bronze, Caleb Payne in the Finn class in Rio 2016, and then again, sadly and famously in 2020, no medals. And then this time, thank goodness, we didn't come away completely empty-handed. The guys did a good job in the 49er class. Ian Barrows was the skipper of that boat, and Hans Henken, the crew. And I hope they're coming to Stag Cruise, by the way, Andrew McGirvin, if you're on here watching. But we did get the bronze in the 49er class. The men's skiff. Any comments about the U.S. situation here over the years, guys?
John?
Well, I'm very pragmatic, and it doesn't do you much good looking behind. You got to put good systems in place to encourage and retain youth sailing and build squad for those people who can do the circuit. And you certainly can't have your top sailors just staying at home. They have to go out and train and race in Europe like all the top countries do. I mean, I've said it so many times, you're not trying to reinvent the wheel. There's a blueprint out there for what you need to do as a successful country. Don't say, oh, we're different. Just follow the leaders, and that will at least get you somewhere near the front.
John, there was some criticism I've seen in the press, and even a quote from IOC President Thomas Bach from Germany, who saw the list of Olympic medals in sailing and said, "Oh, pretty Eurocentric or pretty European focused." Is that fair? Is that good? Is that something wrong with the sport?
The top sailing's in Europe. I mean, that's where it is. And if you want to get on the playing field, just like the Kiwis and the Aussies, you've got to come and train and race against the best. And if you want to have a fair selection trials or whatever, you need to have sailors who can perform against those top sailors. But I mean, if all the time you're looking behind, you're wasting time when you should be looking forward. You can't wind the clock back even 5 minutes. And I think, you need to look ahead. So what's going to be different in 2028? My understanding is, to all intents and purposes, the classes are locked in. There's going to be some very slight changes. So we missed talking about the kites earlier, but basically the leader was racing a 23-meter kite, a much bigger kite than all the competitors. And upwind, he was a click higher. Downwind, he was faster and lower. And it was just a race-winning strategy, a race-winning decision. And basically, once you're up on the foils, as far as I can ascertain, heavier the better, because you just take more power. It's really that simple. Heavier the better. You don't see it as much at the moment in the women's fleet, because it's a very, very hard board to sail. So the people who sail the best are still winning. But when you've got big, superbly strong athletes who can race, just the bigger the better. So what's going to happen next cycle is the men's will come from 23 to 21 meters. And I think it probably saved them, actually, having such big kites at the light airs we had in Marseille. I think it saved them. And the women will go from 21 meters top size to 19. But you need to be looking now at finding big athletes for 2032 or whatever who can do that program. Just as when you're looking for your Ilka sailors, you need to be finding tall athletes who are very good sailors. If you've got people going down the catamaran route, they need to have years before they start to perform. And what we saw in this Olympic cycle in every class is the weight and the fitness went up. I mean, the 49ers and the FX, I said before, I think the black sails and the new mast added 10 kilos. So you need to have that profile. So you put the right person in the right boat. It's like a difference between a jockey and a basketball player. They're both superb athletes, but you've got to be the right size for your boat. I mean, that's why I'm not in an Ilka 7. And that you need to start that program early, because otherwise you're going to get limited by not having those athletes. And what the UK have done is they've actually spread the net wide, trying to get, tall girls to come in from other sports. And my coach, when I was young, Fozzie Bear, I mean, she actually went and got a female basketball player to put in the front of the 470 for her. So it's long-term planning. And you do need, and that's what I love about the Aussie, you do need that positive attitude. Like all the time you're looking back and how badly you've done or whatever, it makes it very hard to go forward. If you look at the way the Brits scheduled, and it's true, I think, for most nations, they scheduled the events so they do well in the beginning. So I think the Americans are likely to do well in track and field and not so well in other sports. They will schedule that at the beginning. We deliberately had sailing scheduled at the beginning. So we had Ben Ainsley getting his historic gold medal, and just to raise the morale.
You're talking about Weymouth.
The whole team.
You're talking about Weymouth 2012.
Yeah. So this mindset, it's really, really important. And these last 2 months, if you're an Olympic sailor, you don't want to think about anything other than the Olympics. So I think a lot of it is a mindset thing. And if you think you can get a turnaround in 18 months, you're just setting unrealistic goals.
Do you think both of you that with the Olympics now going to be in SoCal here in 2028 and then in Brisbane in Australia in 2032, do you think that will help the Olympics be less Eurocentric?
So I'd like to just go back and I'll come to that, but to answer your previous question, Tom, which John had a good crack at as well. I jotted down, you asked about the US. I jotted down 5 words. I put leadership, culture, finance, coaching, and competition. You got to lead it from the top. The culture is everything. You've got to really build that, and we've done a good job of that. You've got to be able to afford to do it, which means that you need all the right relationships with government and sponsors and patrons and whatever. You need high quality coaching. We've found that in every one of our performances over the last 20 or 30 years, the coach has been at least as important as the athletes themselves. And as John so rightfully says, you need the competition. You can't just race against each other in the US and expect to go to Europe and win. You've got to compete with the best. I think to answer your second question, Tom, going to Brisbane and the US, I think it's a great thing. The Europe is the powerhouse of Olympic sailing. It needs to be taken to other parts of the world, and I think the fact that the next 2 venues are not in Europe is a good thing. I'm looking forward to both of them.
I was sitting here thinking about Daniela, who was our only hope at a gold medal or at a medal.
Yeah.
Well, no, we won the bronze.
Yeah.
We won the bronze, remember,
Right.
in the 49er, which was, I don't think, a surprise. I had high hopes for them going in, so
Yeah.
I wouldn't call them a surprise, and they did a very, very good job. Daniela was our high hope for the gold medal,
Right.
because she had won X many world championships in the last
Yeah,
so many
and
years. But you know what? She was light.
Yeah, but that is a basic factor, because she did race all over the world and she did win all over the world, and
I have to say there's two points there, and probably the most important. You need to remember that those World Championships wins were before, or a lot of those World Championship wins were before it was Olympic class. And then the standard just goes through the roof. If you made a Devotti D0 an Olympic class, it will be 3 months, and all the best laser sailors, ILCA sailors were in that new class, and the level would go through the roof.
And to say nothing, John, of the format change.
Yeah, and that was the second point. I mean, it's not as bad as the IQ foil, but there's a lot less certainty. So if you look at the IQ foil format, Emma from GBR would have won with a day to spare, no problem, 30-point lead or whatever it is. The kite, I quite like the format as long as the conditions are good, but it is still the least certain. And the fact that one of the sailors went out on a 23-meter kite, that was a gold medal winning strategy. And that was that.
I just, a couple points here I want to get to. Chris actually, I think, has said exactly the right thing. Alistair clearly brought his CEO capabilities to his analysis today. And one of the problems that we've got in U.S. sailing, frankly, is that the, John, and I'm going to put Alistair back in the shot here. Let's get Alistair here. I think one of the problems now, since we're talking about him, it might be maybe better not to have him in the shot. He's probably going to blush with that big bright sun behind him. But I think the problem is not just the non-sailing CEO; it's the fact that our U.S. sailing leadership are basically, not everybody, but the top leaders are not racers, and that the focus of the organization has completely changed since I was there.
Yes, that's true.
I was talking with Claire Harrington the other day, the Vice Commodore of New York Yacht Club, and Harry Anderson before me in the 80s. Yeah. Actually in the early 70s, me in the 70s and 80s. John Bonds, the late great John Bonds, who was the executive director a couple times after me, and then Charlie Layton, who was a Commodore of New York Yacht Club and a great racing sailor, mostly more of a big boat sailor, but we're all kind of wringing our hands over this, and it's because the culture of the organization is so different from the racing division of the RYA. I understand the RYA covers the waterfront, so to speak, but so different from the culture of Sailing Australia, Alistair. So different.
But the 4 months before an Olympic Games is not the time to change anything.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We really have two units of Australian sailing. One is services and the other is high performance. And in fact, they're two businesses, but they're all under one CEO. That's Ben Houston is his name. But we also, but our high performance director, he's like a second CEO. His name's Ian Bramble. He's from Canada. He's a fantastic man, great individual, and they're basically equal size. The high performance unit is a huge part of what we do, and the services side is same sort of size business, but they operate independently. With the high performance people focusing on nothing but high performance, but it all does end ultimately come in under one umbrella.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what would worry me is if you got a new CEO and people suddenly respect a huge turnaround within 12 months when it's a container ship, and it will take years. I mean, you can do the best with the situation you have, but I think it requires patience. And I've seen it before where really good people have come into a role. They've started to make a real difference, and because the difference wasn't quick enough, they've been bumped on.
Did you mention Malcolm Page?
Yeah, well, I was just going to ask you if you were talking about Malcolm Page.
Yes.
Maybe.
Yeah, he was great. I think he's great.
Yeah.
Well, there are some changes coming. One hears, and a number of others on here will know as well, because they've got their not only ear to the ground, they're part of the process. But the non-sailing CEO who's got to go is going to go. And there's a big fight going on over the leadership within U.S. sailing as we speak. Who's going to be the next president? And they've got to change the culture of the organization. Chris actually saying drink. Peter Taylor said, let's see whether U.S. sailing remains relevant. I hope they do. Card is still in his gang, and all the money that was behind him and then left with him, I think that's going to come back into play. Tom Pace saying that, yeah, Malcolm is awesome. Get that guy Eamon. No, Mark Michelson. I'm not going back. I'm too old. I'm 70, almost 71. Thank you. But if we could get Alistair to come over here and be president of U.S. Sailing, we get John to come over here and be the head coach.
I'm nearly as old as you are, Tom.
I know, but you'd be the volunteer president. Plus, you're rich. You know, I'm poor, so you could be the president.
You could double or treble the money that I make doing this, and it still wouldn't cost you.
I know. Julia and my salary goes up. We double it every year here at Sailing Illustrated. Yeah. It's still zero. Mark Wharton Reed, we had several medal possibilities, but that is racing. It wasn't for lack of effort or potential opportunities on the race course. Yes, indeed. Totally, Mark. And it's hard to talk about this because it's just difficult to talk about it without appearing to be critical of the athletes in whatever country, including and especially ours. So we are fully supportive of the athletes. They've done an amazing job under extraordinarily difficult circumstances. And the sooner we have a cleaning of the house, a clean out of the latrine that U.S. Sailing, I'm sorry to say that it's become, and it's so sad for the sailor. We all said so 6 months ago as this whole turmoil was evolving. One of our foes, John Hanfield, who I think is on here, he was earlier, the entire board needs to go. The members should pick an interim board of sailors who can make a plan of action. Once that is started, talk of a permanent board can begin. We need people from sailing orgs like Brad Reed, READ, and Dawn Riley, coaches, former Olympic sailors, pro sailors, and amateur sailors. That's how you rebuild this house of cards. Mm-hmm. Peter Taylor agreeing with me, latrine, alas, is the correct term, and so sad, but that's what we've got to do. We've got to get rid of the people who are not racing oriented, refocus the organization. Alistair, if you come over and be president, I'll come help as well. How's that?
Okay, that's a deal.
Okay, let's talk about positive things here and some really cool people whose performance, whose success we want to feature. Again, she became some of us called her the GOAT, the greatest of all time, or the BOAT, the best of all time. But Marit Bouwmeester from the Netherlands, like we used to call Sir Ben, or still do, Sir Ben Ainslie, the most decorated male Olympian of all, sailing Olympian of all time. I think most decorated is true. John, why is she so cool, and what has she done?
So even when she was clearly the best in the world, she always wanted to improve. And I think that growth mindset is important. And she's incredibly mentally tough. And I think actually having the baby and all the rest of it increased her focus for her sailing and made her probably even more effective with her time. And, you know, she said to me she was very, very keen to take the cover off, a lot keener to go sailing than she'd been for a long time. And then because she had the experience and the Dutch had the experience, remember, and people always forget to mention, but it was Jaap she got the gold medal with here, and it was Jaap she got her previous gold medal with. So they had that working relationship, and they prioritized their time sailing at the Olympic venue as soon as the selection was clear, and actually to a certain extent before that, to be really as familiar as possible. And so, you know, the US should have an advantage in the next games if the sailors get the opportunity to get more days in there. But I can pretty much guarantee the most successful teams are going to already be looking to maximize their number of days there to race in the likely conditions. I mean, for Rio, I can't even remember how many days I did measuring the current on all the different race courses. And I'll be there when, for example, the 470s were racing, and Sass sort of looked round at me and she's like, well, what are you doing here? And that was exactly the same tide it was going to be for us on that race course on day 3 of our championships. So I think, you know, Marit is a constant professional. It sounds, you know, simple to say it, but it's hard to do it. There's lots of young sailors want to go full-time sailing, and then after 2 years they're like, this is full-time sailing.
Well, a couple other comments that have come up here for both of you, but I'm going to ask Alistair about the men's force, Ilka, in a moment. But the point too is that here in the U.S., John, as you know, and Alistair also knows, the top athletes, if we're just talking about athletes, and, you know, we kind of think about sailors being siloed. You learn in a sailing family, in a yacht club or a community sailing organization growing up. Maybe you get some interest in Olympics because of the junior program or whatever. But you've been born into sailing, you come into sailing at the club level, and then you maybe go up to the Olympics. Whereas other sports, especially in maybe the top countries, they look, as you said a minute ago, John, about the size of the athletes, about the physical attributes of the athletes, about some of the other skills of the athletes, and then focus them into various sports depending on.
I remember doing talent spotting in 2000, and this was when people like Giles Scott were a lot smaller and sailing toppers. And some of the parents asked me, you know, which one's your kid? And I'm there with a pair of binoculars looking at, you know, who I think's going to pop out. And it's really important, this being professional. And that's one of the things when you hear the top people talk, whether it's Marit or Ben or whatever, they have that same mindset. And I always believe in working hard in a fun way. And to paraphrase what Alistair's saying, I think the environment, the atmosphere is really, really important. But the priority has to be the work, to do the work in the fun way. If you're just doing it to go sailing and have fun and then work out, it cannot work like that in the long way, because like any day in the office, you're going to have good days and bad days. And the reason Marit did so well here was
we don't have any bad days in this studio, do we, Julia?
Not at all.
Never ever, John. Come on, man.
You forgot your mic was on before we went pre-show.
Okay, let's move on. Such great, and we got to go back and read the comments because I'm sorry I'm skipping over some, but somebody said, go back and get all the non-racing stuff and send it to what we call here in this country the American Sailing Association, which sort of is the AAA of sailing. And that's what U.S. sailing has aspired to become. So it appears to a lot of us. Forget about that.
Alex's comment.
Who's Alex who? You're
Saldana?
Well, in any event, we got to go back and read all those comments. And Stingray also asked us, are we going to see any sailing video of the games? And the answer, sadly, is no, because if I were to run any of that, and I put it on my Facebook page. I've been running, when I see a good summary video that Gary Jobson's voicing over the NBC video, I put it on my personal Facebook page. But if I ran on this show, we would be knocked off the air, if not during the show, shortly thereafter. So I sadly say we don't have any video on here.
I think Lily's got herself into trouble.
How so? What happened?
Just putting content on YouTube just from, just normal walking around the stuff, and they obviously took exception to that, which is a great shame. But
Well, I've told the two of you in recent shows that remember that famously good, the Irish Olympic, the Irish horn, that guy that mocks our sport. And it was during the Weymouth 2012 up on the hill. And he's saying, oh, they're looking confusing. And somebody's got to cross the line or no one's going to win. And then he realizes it's obviously it was a send up, a put up. But
at that time, World Sailing didn't have a sense of humor, and they objected to that video.
They still do. I ran it on this show, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago, and we got copyright struck because the IOC bought that video. The IOC bought that video, and now anybody who tries to run it, they go after them. You're right.
It's one of the funniest things I've ever seen. I think that we need more stuff like that.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Speaking of cool things, though, we will get yanked off by YouTube quicker than Rod Stewart. Okay. Yeah, and a ton of clip. Well, we've got plenty of good sailors in this country, and we're capable of doing more. But talking about great sailors, and they now have two-peated. They've repeated their gold medal performance, which, as all of you on here will know, is extraordinarily difficult and extraordinarily rare. Yeah, you get the Elstroms, you get the Ainsleys, but now you've got these two and Maddie Weirn, whom we're going to talk about in a minute. But of course, we're talking about Ruggero Tita and Caterina Bonti from Italy, who've come back and not only won, but won by heaps in the NACRA 17. Who wants to start on this?
Perhaps John on this one.
That's not.
It was a great performance. I mean, when you're ready to talk about Maddie Weirn, I've got a lot to say. But it was
I felt sorry. I felt very sorry for sort of sailors and race officials and everyone. Like the NACRA race was sailed in very, very painfully like conditions, and where you have more pressure on one side of the course, which you could sort of plainly see. It does mean you end up in a bit of a one-way racetrack and not much opportunity to overtake. And obviously, I'm friends with John and Anna, and there's that inherent bias there. But you always want things to be settled in the fairest possible way. And when we went back and looked at the kites, I mean, crikey, they didn't even get half their opening races in. And that makes it really difficult. But the Italians, they did an absolutely amazing job, and I'm so glad it ended up like that for them. And I think it was just the marginal gains, particularly for me. I noticed that downwind they could go a bit lower than they wanted, upwind they could go a bit higher, and their tacks I thought were the best in the fleet, and it just all adds up to that point cushion. I mean, and if it was up to me, my heart is more with the sailors than with the media, and I'm probably doing myself out of job, but I'm quite happy with a 12 race series and 1 discard, and the person who sails the best wins. But I get time has moved on, but I think for some classes probably too far.
Okay, we'll see what classes you're talking about because we're going to ask that question in a moment of both of you, because there's a lot of people asking the question here in our commenting list. But let's now move to this gentleman, and he also has two-peated. He won a gold and then came back and won another gold. In fact, Australia, as Alistair has pointed out, has won the gold medal in the ILCA 7 now 4 Olympics in a row, which is extraordinary. Bravo Zulu to Australia. Bravo Zulu to Maddie Weirn. Who wants to start? Since I got you on the air here, John, let's you start and talk about what a fabulous sailor he is. And then
I think Matt. Well, so I think Alistair's probably have far more to say
about
Matt than I have.
You start, and then we'll get to Alistair.
You know more about Ilkas.
Maybe. I know I'm not big enough. If I was as tall as you, I'd still be sailing them. But this success breeds success. And, for Matt and TB, it must have been a very hard time around 2020. But
TB being Tom Burton.
Sorry, yeah, Tom Burton, the success. And if you go back, I mean, from when it was the laser, I mean, you had Ben Ainslie doing a silver in 96, then a gold in 2000. There was a little bit of a blip, but then Paul Goodison did 2008, and you had that squad system in the Brits, which pushed through. And, you know, if you look at the number of world championships. But I think the thing for me with Matt is he's just so mentally strong. I think that was probably, and I think Alistair's far more qualified to talk about this than me. I think it's part of the problem with his illness. And I was talking to Big Rafa, and I think Matt is so good at pushing himself. When he was sick, he just pushed himself through it, which none of us lesser mortals would do. And actually, if they'd realised, he would have stopped earlier and then started recovering quicker. But I mean, he's a lovely bloke. I mean, I always enjoy doing the interviews and stuff with him. And he's just a hiking machine as well. I would have said something like 3 years ago, I was chatting to Emmett, you know, and it'll be above 40 knots. And I would say, yeah, he's going to have a good day. And I said that during the last Olympics, the day he won 2 races. I just knew he was just a tiny click better in those conditions. But I think Matt has brought that wind range down and down and down. And then to win that medal race as well in very little wind. I mean, I did feel sorry for the Hungarian sailor. I was sat here on my sofa shouting at him to sheet in, because when he did the jibe, the wind had gone so far left, his sail was literally lined up with the wind. He just pulled it over and capsized because he's such an athlete. There was nothing to pull against, and he immediately capsized. And I see that a lot. So when you say, you know, did I see the USA house? I mean, it was pretty hard to see a lot from my blue sofa and the Discovery Channel. But yeah, I think Alistair can say a lot more. I met Wernie's parents for the first time in Adelaide. That was really nice.
Alistair?
Yep. Yeah, well, I got quite a bit. I've got a bit of a story here to tell you that I think you might enjoy. But yeah, Brad and Karen Wern are his parents, and they were at our friends and family facility every single day with me. So, you know, they're good friends, and it was great to do that. The reason for success to me is all about the long-term strategy, commitment, dedication, and passion of the whole squad environment that we have here in Australia, and the quality of the coaching and the quality of the management. That's all been good. But Wernie himself was is cool, calm, collected, very, very measured, very modest, you know, a quiet kind of guy. And he was probably the only person in our immediate family, if we want to call it that wasn't in a mad state of panic, you know, during that last day. And this leads me to the story that I want to tell you. And I owe John Emmett a big pat on the back. So for personal reasons, you know, I could only be at the Olympics for the first 8 days of the 12 days of sailing, and I had to get back to Australia. But I'd planned to leave the day after the medal race because I had a pretty good feeling, you know, that Matt was going to win, and I want to be there for the big celebration, as I was there to celebrate Gray Morris's silver. But of course, with the fickle weather, it was postponed. The medal race was postponed a day. It was then due to start at 12:15, and I had to catch a train at 3 o'clock to Paris. And I thought, oh, that's okay, because I'll be able to watch the race, and I won't get to give Matt a big hug and be part of the party, but I'll be able to watch his race. Well, they postponed it 2 hours, and I had to go to the train station. So I get to the train station, and they wouldn't let us board the train because the air conditioning had broken down in our first class coach. And I said, I need to be on this train because I'm connecting to Australia. And they said, well, you can catch the train, but there's no air conditioning. It would have been 40 degrees in Marseille. It would have been 50 degrees or 120 in our carriage. I'm sitting there in the train, and I was sweating profusely. It was the hottest, most uncomfortable environment you could possibly be in. But all I cared about was Matty Wern and Pavlos Konditis. That's all I cared about. Of course, the internet wouldn't work on the train, so I had John Emmett, the great John Emmett, on the phone, and for an hour he gave me a blow by blow description of what was happening in the medal race, you know, that I couldn't see, and he was fabulous. Except he kept feeding me irrelevant information, information like the breeze has gone left. John, I don't care. Hungary's just capsized. John, I don't care. Denmark and Great Britain are having a great battle. John, I don't care. All I want to know is what is Contini's and what is Wern, what's their position? And I wanted that. If he didn't tell me, if it was a minute between him telling me the relative positions, that minute was like half an hour for me. It was the tension on that train was killing me. I had sweat pouring off me. I had a bloody phone call from Australia, from Channel 9, wanting an interview with me, which I conducted halfway through the race. And all I can say is it was probably the most stressful day of my life because I so needed Matty to win that. We were pretty confident that he would because he had a good lead. But John Emmett, you got me through that race, and your live commentary as we went could have been more concise, but you got me through. But in hindsight, I've actually, since I returned to Australia, I of course got on and watched the replay of the medal race, and now that I can see it in the cool, calm comfort of my own lounge rather than in a 120-degree train, I can see how fascinating it was from the bronze medal perspective, and how fascinating that battle was between Peru, Hungary, Denmark and Great Britain, how that positioning kept changing. It was dynamic, it was exciting, there was all the penalties that were being incurred by Mickey Beckett and others. It was so dramatic, but all I cared about was gold and silver, and we were so pleased to get it. Thanks for talking me through it, John.
If the wind's gone left and I've told you Matt's on the left, you should be fairly happy.
I know, but you might have told me that a minute earlier, and then you tell me a minute later that it's gone left. I don't know that he's still on the left. I couldn't see a thing.
They kept on. They did a lot of attacks, but no, it was good. It was good to watch. I did find myself sort of shouting at the TV anyway. So there we go.
Hey, speaking of Peru, I didn't have time, but I was going to stick a picture of the Peruvian Ilka sailor in here. That was that country's, I think, only second Olympic medal ever, right? Something like that.
I mean, he's been knocking on the door for a long time.
Okay, well, bravo to Peru.
Question for John. So John, Mickey Beckett, a feature of that race was how the pressure seemed to get to him. I mean, surely he's never had that many yellow flags in a race. So he, I feel for him that he didn't perform as well as he wanted, but he had a shocker of a medal race with all the penalties.
I mean,
how would you explain that?
The footage I saw, I only really saw when he was actually doing the penalties. I didn't see enough. I didn't think anybody was particularly stand out. The commentators kept on saying 6.5 knots. I would have said it was 5 knots if you were generous with quite a large sea state. But yeah, I mean, I still have nightmares about Lily's penalty in 2012, and that was 12 years ago, because the evening before she had got a penalty in the opening series, she asked me, how should I approach the medal race? And I said, approach it completely as normal, forgetting you've got a penalty, because I thought if you were conservative, you wouldn't win. But I mean, the jury, I never know how to, it's, and actually Lily worked as jury, but it's a necessary evil. But it did seem very strange to see both Peru and GBR spinning and spinning and spinning. And I think I need to be careful what I say, because I don't particularly want to be a jury, but I think you need to have actively raced a boat or a very similar boat to understand what's got on. I mean, the worst one I ever had was in Oman, where a jury boat went around the bottom. This is 11 years ago, so I think I said the jury boat went around the bottom of the final reach, creating a huge amount of wash, and then stopped at the bottom for the final reach. They looked back. I then went wobble, wobble, wobble in their wash, and then they flagged me. I mean, you couldn't make it up. You couldn't make it, and I'm sure it wasn't done maliciously, but I still remember that, and you just think. We have it on Weymouth. I've raced before in Weymouth, where you've had a big boat come in the harbour, and then you suddenly, for no apparent reason, get a huge amount of side swell just coming onto the course. But Mickey, I struggle to think when he's been yellow flagged. But it is a difficult job for the jury, and Mickey is very fast downwind. If you go back and do the analysis at The Hague, that was his get out of jail free card. And I think sometimes if somebody looks different or somebody's a bit faster, there's a tendency you think maybe they're breaking rule 42. I saw just this is interesting. You had this on the beginning of the show, but I saw Paul Goodison in Medemblik sailing very fast downwind on port tack, and he got yellow flagged, and he came and talked to me afterwards. And I really think the only reason he got flagged because he was on a different tack going downwind to everyone else. So his boat looked different to everyone else. And I think everybody else was on the wrong tack. So the angle of the short chop, it was faster on port, but he got flagged. But sitting on my sofa, I can't say anything because I have no idea what it was like there. And I'm sure there's a huge amount of pressure on the jury. And yeah, I mean, I
as you both know, John, I'm sorry to butt in here, but as you both, I did 2 Olympics on the jury. I was the U.S. member of the jury in '92 and in '96 in Barcelona and in Savannah, Atlanta. And I never, ever, you'd come up if you really wanted to calm the fleet down and somebody was, you have to get somebody who's getting a little out of control. Yeah, but all you have to do is steam up closely, try not to get your wake in anybody's way, have your hand down here like it's, ready to pull the trigger on the flag. And you know what? The whole fleet sees that and the whole fleet calms down. I never, ever in 2 Olympics, and I'm trying to remember, probably I did leading up, flagged somebody somewhere. I mean, the Finn sailors in Medemblik, for example, but that's the Finn sailors. The whole fleet would
I'm most worried, Tom, about the Masters events because, so for example, at the Europeans, we will have all of us on the start line. So if you've got a 40-year-old guy and an 80-year-old guy racing, I might be using a bit more kinetics.
Yeah,
I'm much more likely to get. Whereas if I'm racing against the youths, I probably look like a lazy old man, and it's just a case of spot the difference and if something sticks out. But I mean, honestly, from the footage I had, it wouldn't be fair to make any judgment for my.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. You're sitting on your couch.
Yeah. When I'm looking
I just want to wrap this segment up by saying that Fritz Mueller, saying it was great racing, as you both have been describing it, in the Ilka 7 because they were sailboats.
I think we're lucky to have all sorts of different disciplines.
Okay.
Really
okay. Okay.
And, from a commentator's point of view, it was really nice when you have different classes racing on the same day. Really
okay.
Nice.
John likes all the disciplines, including the new ones, including the foils. But I'm now going to get us to another segment here. And I'm going to ask you if it's correct or crutonic. We got to talk about the windsurfing and the format, and we got to talk about the kiting, because one of the things I've just had is a text from a very senior, serious person, and within world sailing, I almost called it ISAF. I will read this to you.
Well, I hope you do a Bravo Zulu for Ellie as well.
Well, I don't have her picture in here, but we still got, we got another show on Tuesday. We can talk about the Olympics, but not at great length. But I just want to get this comment here. This comment is, he's happy to go on the record. Okay, this is the president of the Kiting Federation. He's happy to go on. Yeah, Markus Schwentner from Germany. We were talking about him the other day. He's texted me and he says, but yeah, just use it for now. Probably we can plan another show someday about the incompetence that was showcased in Marseille. And he basically said, you cannot, and I'm going to paraphrase this, but he said, you have no idea what a shit show this event was. Now that's the president of the Kiting Federation. Okay?
I mean, I was texting with Mirko on the boat.
So let's now talk carefully and constructively, but nonetheless, let's talk about what went on, first of all, in the windsurfing medal series. We talked about that on the show, John, with you the other day. And this opening series, and then the winner of the opening series going through to the final and losing the ability to practice during the quarterfinals and the semifinals and so on. And then the finals happen and they just are simply out of sync. They're out of, they just weren't correct. Do you want, either of you care to comment about the windsurfing format and what we've learned? What have we learned?
I mean, I will make a general comment that obviously 33.3% of statistics are made up on the spot. But if you look at Werney or whoever, they're just a tiny, tiny bit better than everyone. So 0.5% or whatever. So if you have that against 40 boats over 10 races, then that cream rises to the top.
Right.
If you have just one race with 3 people and you're 0.5% better than everyone, well, then it's still not a lot of difference, because you've got, 35% chance of winning the race and they've got 33 and 32 or whatever. So that's why I think that it's not good just to finish on that one race. I think the kite format is much better, because just statistically, with just one race, the chance of the person who sails the best during the entire week winning it's relatively the same as everybody else. And that particular race, I've looked through again, and I really don't think Emma could have done anything differently, because she rounded.
We're talking about Emma Wilson.
Yeah.
Who was the leader through. Hang on, John. Hang on, please. We're talking about Emma Wilson from Great Britain. You know so much about this, and you're so far down the road. Hell, Mark Nicholas just calling me out for still calling it ISAF, when we know full well it's World Sailing. Emma Wilson from Great Britain, who was light years ahead coming out of the whatever that basic series, the starting series was, and then goes through the semi. Let me go play this. Get the slide up there again. The semifinals and the finals, and then drops to the bronze. Emma Wilson from Great Britain. You were saying?
Well, I mean, basically, all the other stuff on the left of your slide is completely irrelevant. You've just got 3 people in that final race, and Emma was whatever it was, 30 points clear, would have won the competition with a day to spare with a normal medal race format. But I don't think she could have done anything different, because she came round the leeward gate, left-hand mark, looking upwind. She did a good mark rounding, came out high, and it looked to me like there was more pressure. And then the other boats just came in just slightly higher. So she's not in a position to tack. And the next boat comes in slightly higher, and she's not in a position to tack. And as there's more pressure where they are, they climb their first attack, and they're off, because they are all superb sailors. They are all superb sailors. And there just isn't the opportunity to have a comeback from that point. And it was literally where she was when she rounded that mark. Just the same as if there'd been more pressure on the left, she would have just extended, and it wouldn't have been a race. And I hope, they will look at that format, because I think, you've got athletes' mental health to think about here, and getting young sailors to commit 8 years of their life, and I deliberately say 8 rather than 4, and then for it to be so uncertain that their performance is going to be the same as their outcome. I mean, as a coach, we always talk about performance goals, not
John,
outcome goals.
Yeah, go ahead, finish up, but you got to finish up.
I'd like to add to this discussion too.
Okay, let me get to a couple comments, and then I'll come to you, Alistair. Fritz Mueller, the medal race format is the cruelest of tests in a sport where so many variables contribute to outcome. A series is the only way to define the best in sailing and in perhaps other sports like surfing. Clark Chapin, normal medal race. Most sailors is an oxymoron. Gordon Smith, but pretty much the same type of format as the Gov Cup, etc. So why is it okay one event? Gordon, it's not. It's exactly the opposite. Gov Cup is first to win 3. It's best of 5. And that's the same thing of consistency, developing consistency, making it fair for consistency. And match racing is always meant to be one-on-one, yada, yada. And over to Alistair.
Yeah, because we're in the same situation with one significant difference. So Australia's representative, Gray Morris, he led at the end, went straight through to the final, and then lost in one race. But the difference was he'd had relatively close racing get to that, and he'd earned the right. Well, that's fine. Poor old Emma. I mean, I was devastated for her, for Emma Wilson, to absolutely dominate a regatta, and then to get blown out in one short race was heartbreaking. I spoke to the people of World Sailing about this, and I know that it's going to be under heavy consideration, because they do actually totally get it in the light of what happened. I understand what they're trying to achieve with that.
Alistair, excuse me, but I see evidence that you had a big dinner the last night with the president of World Sailing and the executive director of the CEO of World Sailing. You had all the muckety mucks right there in Australia, Friends and Family House. What else did you convince them of?
Well, we certainly talked to them that. We talked about, the weight issues with boards and whatever. Well, you're going to get to that, I know. But just to finish on the on that format for the IQ4, I get what they're trying to achieve. It does actually reward the sailors as they go through. It rewards the excellence because it gives them a better chance towards the end to get to that final. And then it creates a situation where the final is a winner take all. I kind of get that. It makes some sense. It's got some attraction. But the problem is, it's only one short, sharp race, and it's just not fair.
Exactly.
It needs to be three.
It needs to be exactly. So what you do
first to two or something.
Exactly. What you do is you keep that format, but you have three short, sharp races at the end. So the person who's led throughout the regatta goes straight through the final. That's great. They've earned it. That's fantastic. They're in the final. But give them three short races to show their dominance and to continue the good form they've shown during the week. Expect them to go out in that last race and they've had no practice with the ley lines and where the marks are set. They're racing against people that have raced that course already during the day and they haven't. I'm fine with the format, but make it a three-race final.
And
John, final word to you.
It happened to Emma as well. That's the really hard thing.
Okay, I think we're all in violent, as Clark Chapin would say, violent agreement here. Let's remember all of this, including the medal races, were solely invented for the convenience of television. Is this a sport event or a TV show? The IOC has spoken. It's a TV show. Yeah, okay, Clark, maybe, but let's also remember that we've got to have both. We've got to have a bit of a television show to help support all of this and make it happen. But we've also got to have a yacht race, a sailing event that is fair and proper. And I think, as John has said, Alistair, as you have said, if we simply go back to three in that final situation, or if we go back to the standard medal race, at least you're carrying forward. Okay, you double the points for the medal race. At least you're carrying forward the performance during the earlier part of the week. And Blake Middleton is saying cheers to that three-race final that both of you two are agreeing. Now let's get, if I may, get us to the kites, because kite surfing, which is billed as the fastest sport at the Paris Olympics, hits the water in Marseille. That was the AP story that I ran with you, John, the other day on the show. And in one of those races, and they've got a wind limit, and whether they run it in over the wind limit or not, who knows? But fully 8 DNS in one of the, well, I guess it turned out to be the last race of the preliminary series, right? Because they didn't get to their full complement of races. And then there was, we've already heard that from the president of the Kiting Association. We won't belabor that. Then there was this article that I don't think, gentlemen, I didn't have time to show you in the pre-show. Gisela Pulido, maybe you know her. She was the Spanish rep. Now this is from Marca, the famously good sports website in Europe, the Spanish version, and it's a Google Trans from the Spanish, so it's a little awkward. They haven't let me be able to prove my level, she says. She says goodbye to her first Olympic experience, having played only 6 of the 16 scheduled rounds. This Wednesday, the regattas have been canceled, and she does not enter the medal race. In Formula Kite, the more weights you weigh, the heavier you are, the faster you go. Polished, which measure, polished, I don't know if that's a reference to her, which measures 1.65 centimeters, or if it's the Polish athlete, I'm not sure which, has gained 10 kilos in the last cycle. She has gone from 52 to 62 to increase her performance. Quote, it's a shame. You see some sailors and they don't even look like athletes. I'm even embarrassed, she said. And then the article goes on. This obviously I'm excerpting from it. Light winds are better for her precisely because she weighs less. But whenever there have been these conditions in Marseille, the regatta committee suspended them, meaning the races. Yesterday, without going any further, it happened to her with one when she was third. Quote, I feel like I needed to find a little at my own pace because we did a regatta at home and another regatta at home. It's been a bit complicated. It's been bittersweet, she confesses. And then finally, and she left in the air if she'll do the cycle for Los Angeles, the quadrennium for the next quadrennium for LA. Quote, you have to be realistic, and I weigh 20 to 30 kilos less than my rivals. My body does not adapt to this class. I've been kiting all my life, but not for this class. I wish I told you I want to go to Los Angeles and fight for the medal with the experience I have now, but I also want to be realistic, and I don't want to suffer as much as I have suffered in a campaign in which I have looked technically very good, but physically that I did not get to be in the results because I lacked weight. That's pretty hard to accept, and that's what I've worked with the psychologist the most on which. From winning 10 World Cups to being here to see I make a top 10 is hard to assimilate. I am very competitive, but to have to go to LA, things should change a lot in the class. There is talk of, I guess she means limiting the weight of the athletes, of the committee choosing the kite you have to use, as they do in Sail GP with the wings. There is time left. Right now, I want to enjoy a well-deserved vacation, she said with a smile, and I don't blame her for feeling pretty crappy about all that. Gentlemen?
Yeah, I feel sorry for her. When you look at the regatta, I mean, I was there for, 80% of it. I had to leave before the end, but unfortunately for the kites, they were at the end. They were the last class to go, and the wind absolutely crapped out. It was so hot and humid and windless, and whatever, it was so fickle. And I can tell you at Marseille, even when there was breeze, it was fickle. When there was no breeze, it was absolutely diabolical. And I feel sorry for all the kiters. They just did not have conditions they could sail in. To have a situation where 8 people can't even start because they can't get their kites out of the water. I mean, I think that's absolutely ridiculous. It was just very, very unfortunate. As far as the future of the kite goes, I think the kite's got some issues going forward. I don't want to upset our kiting president who's listening too much, but I was talking to the father of our kiter in the friends and family, and he said the kites are $6,000 Australian. A kite. He's bought 20 of them over the last year. They don't last more than a regatta.
Hold it. Say, Alistair, excuse me. Say that again. This is the father of your kiter, your Australian kiter.
Father of the kiter has bought 20 kites this year. It's cost him $120,000. And he said, if you crash a kite into the water, it's ruined. They don't last. They're not competitive for more than 1 or 2 regattas because the thinner and the thicker lines stretch at different rates and the kite goes out of shape. You've got they're a problem. It's problematic racing them. The wing is coming on strong, and I just think the kite's going to struggle to survive in the long term against the wing, which I think is a fabulous product. And as far as the weight goes, yeah, I mean, you've got to. I know more about the IQ foil than I do about the kite. I mean, but if the weights are getting ridiculous and not representing normal people, you've got to do something about it. Our man in the IQ foil was 110 kilos. They're big people in the kites. They're big people in the foils. I know discussion because we were having that discussion with one of those chats we're having with World Sailing, Tom, is that they're looking in the IQ foil at reducing the weight. Highly likely to happen, I think, in the men's in the women's. In the men's like that it could go as well. That's a discussion going forward. You've got to bring the weight to where it's competitive for average people. The kites, I think they've got a whole bunch of issues to deal with going forward. And I just think the end of that regatta in Marseille, the conditions they got, it was just terrible for the competitors. And I feel very sorry for all of them.
John?
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely amazed me during this cycle that people have been saying that they thought the weight had gone down or complaining there wasn't anything for heavyweight sailors when it just really couldn't have been any further from the truth. So the IQ foils, they're also both going to be reducing the size of sail for both the men and women. Whether that brings the weight down enough, I don't know. That's definitely above my pay grade, but that has been considered. But I mean, I feel really sorry for the kites because, as Alistair rightly said, they just had shitty conditions. That's what you said, wasn't it? Shiftily conditions. Sorry,
shitterly conditions.
That's a fraudulent slip. But I mean, they actually made us look quite bad in The Hague when we had, say, 3.5 knots of current when they could race in the light winds, and the Ilkas we couldn't because we only go 4.5 knots upwind. I mean, Matt Word and Mickey Beckett go 4.75, but I mean, for the rest of the fleet, it was really hard in that, you know, strong current like air. But it needs something was looked at. But I mean, I gotta say, Tom, the best thing is just get Marcus on the show again, because he's a clever guy and he'll be able to answer questions much better than myself or Alistair. I mean, I really enjoy commentating. When you see the kites up in the air, I think they missed a trick. It would have been so nice to have country flags for the kites, for the kites they're going to use. Because I can read 3 letters, but country flags I think would look really cool. And then where I was in Garda, there was nothing, so I couldn't tell who anyone was for the first 2 days until I got used to recognising the body. And then the kites foil at around 10 knots or whatever, and it stays up. And then they come down into the power zone and they're off. And when you look at that close footage with the feet and the hands and the jives and I mean, it's really, really close racing. But I think the class, I think they're very aware of the issues and what they need to do to move forward. But you've got to have a bit of sympathy for them and the conditions they had, because
absolutely.
Very good point, John.
I mean, when the president of the class is calling it a shit show, and Alistair has called it shitterly, and you've called it shitterly, I mean, well, that's going to be our new working word here instead of testicle, Julia.
Oh, good.
Huh?
Yes.
Instead of testicle, we get these 2 guys on and we get a new word.
I mean, for me, it's hard to say, because as a coach, you never want to complain about the conditions. You never say it to your athlete. You just go out and perform what you're thrown at you.
Well, exactly.
But with a media hat on, you can sort of call it a bit more as it is. It's that point that you may have to spend 3 days being completely psyched up that you're going to be going racing in approximately 15 minutes time. And that's the other thing that Werney does very well, I think, to switch off when he can be off and switch on when he needs to switch on, because you can't be on all time. It's just absolutely draining.
There's got to be something to be said for classes and formats that get repeat winners. I think that is an indication that the class and the format is good. I mean, we celebrate in women's gymnastics and track and field, what you call athletics, the repeat, and they have multiple medal opportunities in a given Olympics, and we celebrate all that. And here we are celebrating the double golds by Matt Wern and by the Italians in the NACRA. There's got to be something good about that format and about those classes when that happens, in my humble opinion.
My suggestion with the kites, and I guess I'm talking to the wrong audience, my suggestion with the kites is they have a set kite for that day, which is what they use, and it's the same for everyone, because otherwise it looks a bit like an Ilka 7 racing an Ilka 6. But exactly what those kites are and whether they need to be flatter or everyone has to have a fly surf or whatever, that's really, really beyond me. But I think it would be good that, today's 15 knots, everybody goes out in a 15-meter kite or whatever it is.
I think the solution is coming here at the end of the show, if I may move us forward. You'll see in a moment. Alistair referred to it in a moment, I think. Didn't know what I've got coming up. Julia, last word to Julia.
I've just been sitting here thinking that this whole conversation would be terrific for a couple of groups, and maybe it's young sailors, maybe it's boards of sailing organizations.
People are watching. Don't worry. Don't worry, Julia. People are watching. And Marcus Fentner has agreed to come on the show as we've been sitting here. And I'll give you one other thumbs up from John. And one other good piece of news is that no one less than Luca Devoti is coming on 2 weeks from today.
Oh, good.
To discuss all this. Luca Devoti is coming out. There's the D3 logo on John's right on his shirt. Alistair, final word to you, then we're going to move forward.
Yeah, okay, really important final word, Tom. Really important. I mean, I don't want anything to be taken away from Ellie, who's an absolutely amazing athlete. You talk about doing a pressure tack at a Windward Mark. These are amazing athletes. And for you traditionalists, she came 29er, FX, all the rest of it, and then got a bit addicted to speed, from what Mickey tells me. And I think that's quite a hard switch to switch off when you've been over 30 knots once. I don't think you go back. And to the Austrian who won the men's, like, he sailed just so well. And it is an incredible, if you ever have a go kite surfing, they make these really hard things look very, very easy. You look at the number of wipeouts you saw with world-class athletes, and nothing should take away from his gold medal.
No, quite right. Alistair, last word to you.
Yeah, just to placate my friend Marcus with the kites, I made a few comments there, but I think it's a fantastic product, but they need to deal with some issues like what I mentioned, and then I think they've got a competition against the wing for the future. In terms of which is going to become and be the most popular. I do agree with John about the identification. I was out there on the water watching the kites. I had no idea who anybody was. You just couldn't tell. That was a bit of an issue for a spectator. But I just want to get one comment in about something you said, Tom, about the best sailors winning and people being able to go back to back. David Graham, the CEO of World Sailing, he's a great guy. I've got to tell you, I spent a lot of time with him during the Olympics, and he is committed to formats and racing that rewards the best sailors. They want to see the best people winning, and if you look at Emma Wilson, they acknowledge that was a pity, the way it all worked out. That was not fair. That it was poor. They'll be looking at better ways.
Pity ain't the word, Alistair.
I know that. I know that it was a tragedy for her. He is committed to improving things for the future so that the best sailors do win. That's what we're all after.
I'm going to give the final comment here to Andrew McIrvin. I don't know if it's up off the slides. I think it's up off the list, but he said a few minutes ago, and in fairness to the kites, the class, and to the sailors and everybody else, the problem, you can argue about formats and all this other stuff, but there were many better places in France to race. He means whoever chose Marseille should be guillotined. That's the best comment of the day. I mean, at the end of the day, had this been on San Francisco Bay, this famously, as Julia likes to call it, the iconically beautiful and famously windy venue, if it had been in Weymouth, if it had been in Melbourne, we wouldn't have these problems. You got to run sailing in venues that are good for our beloved sport, and not in venues that are placating the political party in Marseille or in the greater France. Okay, that's my final word. And thanks, Sean Hogan, for coming on. Great show, except for Alistair.
What did Alistair do to upset him?
Great show. Thank you all, except Alistair. Let's wrap this. Let's move forward here. We got a quick segment on this day in history. I've wrapped two segments into one here, but thank you guys. That was a fabulous discussion.
Yes, it really was.
Andrew says that Facebook censored him. This day in history in 1851, gentlemen, Julia, I'll let you go first, Julia. What happened on this day in history in 1851, the 9th of August? Here's your first clue.
You're not telling me what country.
I will tell you that in a moment. First clue, Blake Middleton. No, 3 days after the atomic bomb. No, this is a Brit. I'll tell you that much. There's your second clue, the famous painting of... Well, on the one on the right was the then Commodore of the Royal Yacht Squadron, Queen Victoria.
For the America's Cup.
Queen Victoria ate curry for the first time. Gordon Smith is asking. He gets the second best comment of the day.
Yeah.
That is John Cox Stevens,
right,
who was the first Commodore of New York Yacht Club. And it is between these two gentlemen, the second, actually, Earl of Wilton, who was the then Commodore for a long time of the Royal Yacht Squadron. They were back and forth trying to agree the conditions for the upcoming, what would turn into. But at this stage, on the 9th of August, it was not clear that there'd be a race on the 22nd of August around the Isle of Wight. And there's your third clue as to what the agreement on this date in 1851 involved. Do you recognize those two types of yachts, gentlemen or lady? One is a schooner, and one is a cutter. See, the schooner with a single mast and the cutter with two masts. Those are the two popular types at the time. This is an 1876 painting by somebody called Richard Beechey from Great Britain, who lived during the 1800s. And if you're wondering what it was that these two agreed on the 9th of August, 1851, it was that John Cox Stevens wrote to the Earl of Wilton and said, well, look, my challenge, which was, you remember the yacht America was a schooner, and it was he challenged any schooner in the Royal Yacht Squadron, and they wouldn't take the challenge. In fact, any schooner in the kingdom was the original piece of paper. And on the 9th of August, he amended that to say, any cutter, schooner, or vessel of any other rig of the Royal Yacht Squadron. This is just a couple weeks before the bloody event. And it was on the 9th of August that they finally cemented the deal, not because the squadron thought that was such a good idea, but as Magnus the Magnificent points out in his book, which we feature on here regularly, Magnus points out in his book on page 75 that phrase that I just showed you, I'll back it up, that phrase finally convinced the squadron, not so much because the squadron was then thought, well, we've got a better chance against America, but they got beaten up so badly by the media over not accepting this challenge, and after subsequently kind of coming down and saying, we'll race any boat, cutter, schooner, or vessel of any other rig without any rating, without any tonnage allowance or so on. It just needs to be out in the open ocean around the Isle of Wight, yada, yada. So it was, and Jody Shields says, any challenge that includes a schooner, he's interested in. So it was on this day, on the 9th of August, just a couple weeks before the Cup. I thought this would be a nice segue as we're going into Cup season now after the Olympics, right? But get Magnus's book, Magnus Wheatley's There Is No Second. And that, gentleman, that lady, Commodore, is what happened on this day, on the 9th of August, 1851. Had that not happened, there's serious doubt, as Magnus spells out in his book, that there would have even been a race around the Isle of Wight on that day, way back when, 5 years ago, on 1851, nearly 175 years ago, 173? 1851? What's the math? Okay, enough of that. That brings us to the last leg, and I have a segment for the pleasure of our two guests as well as all of you, and that is an article that appeared this morning. Speaking of being awake in bed at 5:30, reading the local paper online, in the San Francisco Chronicle, there's an article today that announces that San Francisco Bay is to host a wild new water sport race this weekend. In fact, starts today, I believe. And there's another picture. It's a great article. I haven't seen the actual physical paper. Have you, Julia?
I haven't had a chance to read it, but I have it.
You had a busy morning.
I did.
So this article shows up in the Cron, as we call it. Like some people call it the San Francisco Comical. This weekend, San Francisco is hosting the first ever U.S. National Wing Foiling Championship, a 3-day slate of speed racing in the waters off Crissy Field, which is the beach to the west of St. Francis, that marks a key development for a growing competitive water sport with strong roots here in the Bay Area. Wing foiling cropped up in the Bay Area in the past 5 years as an evolution of windsurfing and kite surfing. Wingers, as they're known, strap their feet into hydrofoil surfboards and propel themselves using huge handheld inflatable sails. The waters just inside the Golden Gate are renowned, Julia,
Yes.
among sailors worldwide for their strong, reliable winds, fluctuating currents, and
Iconic scenery.
your favorite word, favorite description. all of which makes for dynamic racing conditions. Apart from inspiring board sport enthusiasts, the Bay is chosen it was the chosen site of the annual Sail GP Championship, as well as the Rolex Big Boat Series coming up next month. And there is Johnny Heineken, the famously good windsurfer before he was a kiter, and now he is a winger, a wing foiler. And as a quote from an executive at U.S. Sailing, with an exclamation point at the end, as the fast-growing, exciting part of our sport, U.S. Sailing is thrilled to establish a national event for wing foil sailors, unquote. Andrew Clouston, U.S. Sailing's Clouston, I don't know, Senior Vice President of Programs and Services, said in an announcement this summer, quote, this event has the potential to be one of the biggest U.S. sailing championships ever, Julia.
Ever.
Give me a break. I mean, it's great stuff. And St. Francis would have pulled this all off by themselves, probably even better. The 3-day championship regatta mixes short course races of 10-minute sprints with slalom racing and includes a 20-mile. Speaking of 20 miles, too bad that got canceled in Marseille with the distance race. A 20-mile out and back from the beach here at Crissy Field, next door to St. Francis, to the Berkeley Pier over in the East Bay. For that longer journey, wingers will have to dodge shipping traffic and sailboats and maneuver around Alcatraz and Angel Island. Quote, it gets tiring, unquote, said Johnny Heineken, a 36-year-old national kite surfing champion from Larkspur, which is up in the north of the bridge, who won last year's spring wing ding. Maneuvering the hand sail is a special skill. It essentially cuts visibility in half, and dipping its lower tip into the water can pitch a winger into a faceplant, Heineken said. Quote, it's a little tricky keeping track of who's around you. He said, you need to occasionally pick the wing up and glance around to make sure you're not too close to anything. Finally, he said, apart from a trophy, the wing ding champion won't take home a cash prize or secure a spot in an international competition, just bragging rights, and maybe, just maybe, the potential for participating in a future Olympic sailing event. What saith you, John and Alistair?
Great product, winging, just great. All power to it.
We saw an awful lot of people doing it for recreation. I remember I used to get a bit of hassle from the girls that we got the ILCA training sessions done and dusted in about 3 hours door to door, so they had enough time for a little rest to go winging afterwards. I mean, I think there was talk that they wanted to go winging before, but we had to
make them buckle down
on that.
Yeah.
Graham Sweeney maybe gets the final comment. Wingers, well, it's an improvement from swingers. Julia, doesn't that get a finger?
No.
No?
You'd be swinging on the swing.
Okay. Alan Long thinks this is probably the best show ever. Send it to us, a U.S. ailing and not non-sailing CEO on the board. Gentlemen, I cannot thank you enough for your fabulous contributions to this show. And yet there is one more which was approved by Alistair during the pre-show.
Yes.
And it's not this one. We're doing Whiskey Tango Foxtrot now, as you can hear the theme music for that. And we've been talking about this. This maybe has gotten more comments than anything I've ever posted on my Facebook page. We're getting comment at the Turkish, the shooter from Turkey, who just walked up, hand in pocket, blam, 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 silver medal, no special heads-up display, Google glasses, and other contraptions that all the others use. That was sent by Matt Suzuki. We ran that in the previous show. And then on our show Tuesday, we sent someone sent this one in saying, here's that same gentleman, the Turkish shooter, making fun of us here in California, saying that's what he will look like in the 2028 Olympics in San Francisco.
L.A.
In L.A. Thank you, Julia.
It's more L.A. than San Francisco.
Yeah, it is definitely L.A. In L.A. And then that was sent by none other than Ted Ryman in Cape Town in the Republic of South Africa. Now we have, Julia, we have another one.
All right.
Here's the next one. And this one came through from Clayton Embley. Agent, we need you for one last job. I'm retired. You have to do it for your country. Fine. Good. Remember, keep a low profile. And he walks up, blam, 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 silver medal. And he is all over the internet, almost as much as the guy who was the high jumper who had his dingus hit the bar and knocked the bar off, Julia.
No.
But as Alistair said, the Australians have done very, very well in the Olympics, not only in Olympic sailing, but across the board, so to speak. And we thought we would use one last image in Whiskey Tango Foxtrot. This was sent to me by one of the FOSI and offered it as a caption contest. And I didn't even look at it. I messed up the lower third.
Contrast.
The contest. Alistair, you're a witness.
No comment, but I look forward to the captions that are submitted. But I just want to say one thing that's completely not related to this. I just want to say what a great community you've established with the FOSI, Tom, and with this show. And I just want to say what a pleasure it was on my recent trip to catch up with Andrew Pindar and Andrew McIrvine. And I really love drinking beer with John Emmett.
Great.
John, any comments on this caption, on this image? This does not look like one of our kiters. Did we lose John?
Maybe so.
No comment.
Oh, no comment. Okay, I'm glad I'm not doing the high jump. That's from Ted Ryman. I bet he's the only one that leans back on the finish line. Jody Shields packing heat.
Yeah, we'll do that. We'll get a finger for that.
Oh, that's a good one. Okay, we do have a clever community, and gentlemen, we so appreciate you coming on again, and Alistair, especially in your early morning. John, you've been on, 3 shows in a row now, haven't you? And it's been great. We appreciate it very much. Anything else for the good of the order?
No, but both of them have been fabulous.
Well, I think probably we know what the Olympic classes are for 2028. So we know what worked in 2024, and it's not rocket science. It's about putting the hours in and building the community and doing the competitions.
Does that mean you think they're going to get repeated? All of them as is? You think, including the kite? Okay.
Everything else is just, words in the wind. You know what you've got to do.
Pretty sure they're locked
for the next, 3.5 years.
Well, okay, that answers the one remaining question that we had from, 2 hours, 2 hours and an hour and a half ago. Anyway, gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. We really, really appreciate having you on again for this show number 730, and we'll do it again Tuesday. And as I said, 2 weeks from today, we will have none other, Julia.
Yes.
We're going to have Luca Devoti on, and John's got his T-shirt on. Congratulations, Australia. Let's hope that the kites are replaced for 2028 or removed or moved to their own federation. Clark Chapin is saying. Blake is saying thank you much to all involved here, Earthbound FOSI everywhere. And that gets us well and truly to the finish line. And Julia, you like to say...
Yes, please like, follow, and share. There's a lot of good information in here.
And carry on with the comments.
Yes, don't forget to read them.
There are lots and lots of comments, especially on a show like when we have such erudite, such distinguished guests as we did today, Julia.
Absolutely.
So go back and read the comments, as Julia likes to remind us. Thank you again to all of you who support us here via Patreon. Become a patron, patreon.com/join/Sailing Illustrated. And we hope to see you on the show next Tuesday. We'll be back at it with more help from people who give us the images and the videos. Sorry, no videos to speak of today because we don't want to get knocked off the air by the IOC.
Yeah.
But the images, the video, and the audio for today's show, much appreciated, as all of you. Thanks for watching. See you next Tuesday, same time, same channel. In the meantime, sail fast, sail safe, and have fun. Ciao for now.